As promised, today I am going to be delivering my Cardano price prediction for 2024. And if you hold Cardano, you guys are going to absolutely love this video. We're going to be going back in time and showing you guys that in the same manner that Cardano went up to the $3 mark and came out of a 2018-19 bear market, it is doing the exact same thing today. And we're going to be showing you this. We're going to be using a technical pattern that we've had huge success with in 2023 to predict where we think Cardano is going to get to in 2024. And I promise you are going to enjoy this video. Do try and watch it in full and reference this video as we go through 2024. Because it's just the start of 2024, this is a perfect time to get this video out. Some of you may be skeptical on technical analysis, and hopefully we can turn you into believers. We have given price predictions for Polkadot and Hedera so far, and today we are going to be diving into Cardano. We're going to be identifying this specific pattern. We're going to be showing you some of our calls from last year that played out perfectly, that give, I guess, a degree of probability that Cardano is setting up the same thing and going to follow a similar path. We're also going to be looking at altcoins that move and have moved in a similar manner and that have played out, and some of them are even at new all-time highs. So we're not calling new all-time highs for Cardano in 2024, but close. So without further ado, guys, let's dive into the video and let's head over to the charts. So really where I want to start is with a nice zoomed out chart, a weekly chart. And I actually want to look at the prior cycle and the run that we had all the way down from a couple of cents to $3 and show you guys that a similar thing is essentially taking place again today. And we'll actually go over and look at other charts where what we're predicting for Cardano has played out, and Cardano is very much following a similar path. So do strap yourselves in, but let's start. So we know what happened in 2017 and how 2018 transpired. The first thing I want people to pay attention to is the double bottom-esque formation, or the marginally lower lows that were put in. This was essentially where Cardano was basing. This essentially is what we would describe as a stage one. So we like to break the market into 4 stages. I teach stage analysis within my Patreon, where we look at a basing stage, an uptrend, an ascending stage, a topping stage, which is stage 3, into a descending downtrend, which is stage 4, only for things to rinse and repeat. And I'm essentially claiming that Cardano is here, perhaps a little bit more progressed, more likely here, and ultimately has upside and an uptrend to come. So not only do I think Cardano has broken out of its stage 1 base, I think that it's going to see further continuation. When you break out of a stage 1, that means you enter stage 2, which is an uptrend. We got this very right for the likes of Bitcoin and the stock market last year. And we're now looking at altcoins, which look very similar to a lot of the smaller stocks out there, and saying they are now in a uptrend that we believe is going to see continuation. So going back to sort of 2019 to 2020, you can see this double bottom-esque formation. It looks very similar to where Cardano currently is today. Now, let's introduce the pattern that we want to identify. And the pattern we want to identify is an inverse head and shoulders. I'm going to show you this with the chart the correct way up, which it currently is, and inverted, because often people find it easier to spot head and shoulders when they are sort of the right way up, not inverted. So we will be doing that. But I'm essentially claiming that Cardano is doing the same thing as it did here. Okay, so what am I looking at? Well, let's dive into this and let's actually drop down to a 3 daily time frame. We're going to understand the history, perhaps to understand the future. And this just doesn't play out specifically on Cardano. This plays out across the board. Markets rhyme. They don't repeat in a perfect nature, but they repeat in a similar fashion. You do this thing when you're going down in a market. You form this thing called a nestling head and shoulders, and you do it in the same way going up. It looks kind of like what you used to draw on a whiteboard as a kid. But this is what we are identifying in regards to Cardano and when it's currently at. So this is your left shoulder. This is your complexed head. We'll draw very, very quickly for you. And then this smaller structure here is your right shoulder. And let's just draw that very, very quickly, that we ultimately think is playing out again today. So if we zoom in on this even more, you can see this is essentially what we are identifying. A double bottom with a marginally lower low into a run where you met resistance. Let's just lower this neckline slightly. And you can see there was 2 touch points in here. You've got your left armpit, and then you've got your right armpit over here. So this is your right shoulder, which is weaker than your left shoulder, which you typically want to see. And if you want to predict a head and shoulders target, you take the bottom of the pattern to the break on the neckline, which would have occurred on volume, by the way. So this break here was on exaggerated volume. You can see the actual break point, which is a very confirming factor. You want to see that on a breakup, a breakdown of a market. So if you were doing this in reverse, the volume isn't that important. But when you're breaking out of a base, when you're breaking out of resistance, you want to see it happen on volume. It gives a degree of conviction behind the move. So if we project the head and shoulders target, the really interesting thing about this, and we're going to show you where history is repeating, if you look at where this ran us into, it's almost like clockwork. If you're not a believer in technical analysis, guys, do subscribe to this channel because it's what I've always strived to be. And if you had followed me certainly throughout last year, you'll know that we called things pretty accurately. And then moving away from this now, going to more sort of present day and going back up the time frames, you can see that this predicted head and shoulders target, and we'll go back to the 3 daily very quickly because you can see just how much of a perfect target this was. Look at where your wicks and the sell-off actually occurred. If you look at where we got to, you know, it was pretty perfect. And then you can see a degree of confluence over here before Cardano really broke down. So what I'm essentially calling for is history to repeat. And the market structure is very similar. So now that we've covered a little bit of history and we've shown that Cardano has formed one of these patterns previously and it's actually played out pretty perfectly, and we're going to show you lots of examples of this inverse head and shoulders pattern that we're addressing playing out again. Just quickly, let me show you the inverted chart because it gives and looks a lot more. I think it doesn't quite spur everyone's ADHD when it's the right way up. But if we now put it back to the uninverted chart and we look at where Cardano is today, you can see the exact same thing is essentially taking place. We've been in a downtrend really since the Alonso hard fork. And ultimately, this is your stage 1 base. So our stage 1 base would have been support here into resistance, and actually you got the breakout of this stage 1 base on volume. Now some people will say that the volume isn't massive, but it is amplified when you look back at Cardano's kind of volume profile. You know, there's a lot more volume on this break than there was previously. So the volume is amplified, typically 2x more than previous sessions is what you want to see. Kind of confirming this breakout and the fact that an uptrend is now in place. But removing this stage 1 base, let's look at where Cardano currently is today. Let's drop down the time frames. Actually, let's keep it on the weekly because it's important. One reason we were able to get into Bitcoin as early as we did back on January the 5th, which we also made the public call. And of course, 2023 was a spectacular year for us from an accumulation point of view. And thus we finished the year up, you know, 100+% up, some altcoins 200-300% up. We're expecting further continuation and upside across the board, not just for crypto, for stocks, for gold, for everything. We think we've got this real macro picture right, and we talk about it in our daily market updates. But one of the things that allowed us to get into Bitcoin very early on was this bullish divergence. So a bearish divergence is something like what happened here, where this high was correlated with the RSI here, and the next high, the higher high that it put in, was correlated with the RSI here. So all the RSI is, it's a momentum-based indicator. It gives you a degree of momentum behind the move, and you want to see confluence, the same thing with your RSI in an uptrend that you do with the price. It's not always perfect, but it can be on a broader time frame, not necessarily the smaller time frames, although it is applicable. A very good indicator that a trend is about to change. If you've got that bearish divergence in an uptrend, you want to be on alert. If you've got that bullish divergence in a downtrend, the same thing. So you can see Cardano actually had a bullish divergence down here, which gives us a clue, just like we were looking at for Bitcoin, that the trend, this downtrend that was in place, is now subject to change. And since then, it's given broader confirmation based on the chart. So in the same way that we identified a head and shoulders here that ultimately predicted a target up here, which is pretty perfectly where you sold off from and then where you consolidated on the second high that was based on the Alonso hard fork, A similar thing is happening today, and we're going to drop down the timeframes to show you this, and then we're going to go over to other markets to show you. We'll look at some markets that we had success with last year, like the stock market, and then we'll bring it all back to Cardano. So what I'm essentially saying to people is that Cardano is playing out in the same fashion that it did previously. So this is what we're identifying. This is your right shoulder. Sorry, this is your left shoulder. This is your complex head in a double bottom formation. And you are now on the cusp, which is going to allow us to predict where we think Cardano is going this year, of forming a right shoulder. So to confirm this pattern, the neckline, which we're going to lower slightly and take these wicks and sort of trim these ones a little bit, is currently at 67 cents. So if you can take 67 cents on volume, like you did previously, and like we'll show you plenty of examples in a second, you are, in my opinion, now on the road to fulfilling and to this pattern playing out. So again, to predict a target, we're going to be going from the neckline, and we are going to be projecting upwards, which coincidentally runs us very close to what is clearly a key level set by this target down, this pattern down here. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, if this inverse head and shoulder plays out, I believe Cardano is heading above $2, round about $2 in 2024. Now, I'm not going to give any kind of crazy price prediction for 2024. What I am giving is a technical pattern that has the possibilities and looks likely to play out given the context of things, that is going to see Cardano move towards that $2 mark, which is clearly a very, very key level before you run into resistance again. So if you look, you can see, this is essentially the kind of area that I believe you're running into in regards to Cardano. People make technical analysis far too complicated. They try and use all these signals and they try and use indicators. Understanding basic technical patterns, in my opinion, it works for me. And hopefully I believe it will work for you guys. So this is essentially the route that I believe Cardano is on. We have a $2 target. And now what I want to do, because some of you may be a little bit skeptical, let's invert this chart very quickly to show you this the other way up. You can see what's taking place, very similar to what took place previously. And let's get on the weekly to show this, although this head and shoulders doesn't show up as well on the weekly. You can see the same thing playing out today. This is a macrocosm and this is your microcosm of what's taking place, with a likely $2 price prediction this year for Cardano if this pattern plays out. Remember, what do you need to see? You need to see a breakout on volume, and we're going to show you plenty of examples of this particular pattern that we had huge success with last year playing out across not just crypto but many of the other markets. So this is the projection for me for Cardano, a $2 price prediction in 2024. That's where I think it's going to go. Could it go higher than that? Absolutely. But I want to see a technical reason to be suspecting that, not just I think it could. In 2020, when Cardano was around about a few cents, we predicted a $5 to $7 Cardano price, and it got to $3. And when I look back, really I should have gone technically on that price prediction, not based on market caps and where I thought it could get. Lesson learned, we got a lot of stick for not getting to $5. $3, I mean, it was 100 plus X, or just under 100X returns. But lesson learned, the price predictions that we give are technically generated, and the reason that we give prices is based on technical analysis, not based on where we think something could go. So do save this video, do reference it, come back and laugh at me if I'm wrong in 2024, but I believe Cardano is going to the $2 price range. And actually what I want to do now is show you plenty of examples of this exact structure playing out. The first place to start, quite obviously, would be Bitcoin in regards to what we were looking at for Bitcoin last year. And we're essentially looking at a broader head and shoulders pattern playing out for Bitcoin, but that's for my daily market updates. This was, to drop right down the timeframes again, what we were looking at in 2023. Not only was there that bullish divergence, which we've just shown you, that signaled a trend change here and here with the FTX spill, we then set up a head and shoulders in this kind of a pattern. This head and shoulders predicted, and this is how we had a $42,000 price prediction for Bitcoin in 2023 that got hit. It was perfect, okay? It's not just Bitcoin that this pattern has played out for. Let's show you it on the inverted time frame again. You could see this break, retest. So with Cardano, it's very likely you're going to get a break and then a retest. So if we go back to the Cardano chart very quickly, once you break this, hopefully on momentum, you may come back for that retest before you then journey on down to the $2 range. And let's show you that the right way up. So we've shown you an example of Bitcoin. There are literally, I think, 20 or 30 things that we looked at that had a similar structure that all played out. This is others dominant, so altcoins outside the top 10, you know. You can see we had a smaller head and shoulders pattern down here that led to a broader head and shoulders. The interesting thing about this one is the target of the smaller head and shoulders took us here, which then has set up a broader head and shoulders, if that makes sense. But this is a perfect example of this head and shoulders pattern playing out. You don't want to see that right shoulder come lower than the left shoulder. That would give me a degree of skepticism on the pattern actually playing out, which we'll look at for Cardano in just a second once we've gone through a few examples. So this was one. Injective was another one, or one that is essentially just setting up. Again, double bottom. Okay, not a marginally low low, but a form of a double bottom. You then broke it on volume, very, very important. You came back for the retest, and then you ventured up to what is now setting up to be a head and shoulders that you broke out of on volume, not massive volume, but certainly bigger than the prior sessions. And now you're on your way to injective to the $73 mark. So we're giving you two price predictions in this video. Let's also look at Coinbase. Coinbase was a brilliant stock for us. So here we have Coinbase, rather messy, but essentially what we were identifying was this head and shoulders here in the same way we did it for many, many stocks. And this is the neckline. We've got two necklines on here because it's now setting up a broader head and shoulders. You can see this is your left shoulder. This is your head. And we'll drop down the time frames to make this kind of a little bit more applicable. So this was something that we looked at last year. We were accumulating Coinbase in the $30, $40 range. If you want to get in on these buys when I'm looking at them and where I'm looking at them, do consider becoming a Patreon, because we honestly drop. You know, last year was fantastic and every single Patreon could attest to that. Let's move this shoulder over here. A little bit more complex with this as your relative neckline. The break of this, again, was on volume. You come back for a retest, and then just recently we made our head and shoulders target that's now actually set us up for a broader head and shoulders. You can see how you interact with these levels and you form your armpits. So we've given a number of examples. We can also give a number of examples in the stock market, which we got very right last year. You can see this is Microsoft. This was really our golden child, to be honest. Let's go back up the time frames. We had, and look at where you sell off. This is a bit of a messier head and shoulders, but it has the same DNA. Stage one base, left shoulder, head, right shoulder, weaker than the left, just about. Then you get the break on volume, I might add, the retest, and then the target that was projected gave us a $356. Bear in mind, we predict all this, you know, looking at this just like we are now with Cardano. Target was hit, and then this is where the sell-off occurs. Falling wedge sort of structure or descending structure with three impulses in it before you then go and see further continuation. So this is what I'm calling for Cardano. It doesn't just stop there. We also gave predictions for the NASDAQ. Again, right shoulder, head, left shoulder. You can see this. Break, consolidation before target was met perfectly, and that's perfectly where you sold off. So we've shown you multiple examples that we looked at last year. What we're essentially doing is looking at patterns and looking for history to repeat and these patterns to play out. And Cardano, in my opinion, is in a similar thing to what took place going out of the prior bear market. So just in the same way that last year we predicted many, many different things, you know, upside for the stock market when everyone was very sort of unsure and scared, based on the technical patterns that we saw. We're now predicting this for Cardano, and actually this DNA shows up across the board. So we are very firm and sort of fixed on continuation for Cardano. and upside. And ultimately, my price prediction for Cardano this year is a $2 one, which I think would make people rather happy. Now, again, do save this video, do reference it. If I'm wrong on this, do come back and tell me I'm wrong. We'll always admit when we're wrong. But we believe that Cardano is now heading towards the $2 mark, and I hope you're all strapped in for that journey. At what point would I be wrong and start to get a little bit worried? Well, it's definitely important to cover that. Ultimately, if we ran the left shoulder, which is all the way down at 38 cents. That would pretty much invalidate things for me. I wouldn't like to run this support and this kind of stage one where we broke out into the stage one, which is at sort of $43. I think this is going to turn around a lot quicker than people think. I think if you look at others' dominance, if you look at Bitcoin dominance, that looks set to roll. And ultimately, this is going to spur on the altcoin. So I do believe Cardano is now in a confirmed uptrend. And I think there's now a technical pattern that is going to take us toward the $2-ish mark. So that is all I've got for you in this video, guys. If you enjoyed the content, like is appreciated. So as a comment, don't forget to become a patron if you're not already. Link in the description. And go over and check out our website, allincrypto.com. That's all I've got for you guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.